Hello, everybody. My name is Peilon Su, class of '07, physics and electrical engineering. I am part of the MIT Social Entrepreneurship Alumni Group, SEAG. Today, we are having a panel discussion about the revenue-generating powers of social entrepreneurship. With me here today are three members from SEAG, Sayuri Sharper, Harpreet, and Vera. And so I'm going to ask them to quickly introduce themselves to everybody. So Sayuri, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am class of '81 with both master's and bachelor's in electrical engineering. My first career was in tech, and then I became a lawyer, and now I'm retired and spend most of my time in philanthropy. And within that, doing impact investing and mentoring social entrepreneurs. And I found this SEAG within the alumni group.
Yep. Sayuri was the one who started all of this for us. So thank you, Sayuri. Vera, would you like to go next?
Of course. Hi, Peilon, and great to meet all of you. I'm Vera. I graduated with a PhD in chemistry from MIT in 2019, 2 years ago now. During my time at MIT, I spent a lot of research doing very applied work, developing gas sensing devices. During my PhD, I thought that I would spin that out into its own startup now. That did not happen. I joined a venture fund instead called So Far Partners. We invest broadly in technology areas, all the way from clean tech and advanced materials over biotech, medical devices, all the way to AI, IT, robotics. Our fund is a signatory of the UN Principles of Responsible Investments, and we have formalized our ESG evaluation when we make investments. So we do invest in companies that do good for the earth, that do good for people. I'm part of MIT SEAG. I joined last year. Me and Harpreet started the Social Entrepreneurship Lab as part of SEAG, where we recruited a cohort of 10 people that are all entrepreneurs in the social impact space. And we have a program of experts and cohort sessions for them. Yeah, happy to meet all of you.
Wonderful, thank you, Vera. And then Harpreet, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful, it's great to see all of you. So I'm an MIT MBA from 2009. And my career has spanned traditional international aid, starting with working at UNICEF in South Asia and CARE USA, and even as far-flung environments as Tajikistan. I also have been a strategy consultant with the Bridgespan Group focusing on social enterprises. And during my time at MIT, I helped found 2 social enterprises, but still took this step into tech and worked at Apple for 8 years after that. I'm now have spent the last 4 years focusing on learning native approaches to health, wellness, and environment. And I am proud to be a part of MIT SEAG.
Thank you, Harpreet. All right, so this panel discussion is going to be just under half an hour. We are going to save the last 5 to 10 minutes for audience questions. So since there are so many of us here, if you would like to ask questions, could you please, as we're chatting, could you please type your questions into the chat? We will get to them at the end, and or if you want to hold off till the end, that's also perfectly okay, and then we'll talk about questions in person. All right, so to start the panel discussion, let's see. So social entrepreneurship. I think all of us have different definitions of social entrepreneurship. We kind of know what it is, but probably everybody thinks it's something slightly different about it. So Harpreet, let me start with you, and then each person, Sayuri and Vera, could you also answer the same question, which is, what would be your definition of a social venture or a social impact venture?
Such a great question to start, because it is a very broad and potentially amazing field. The way I decide to define it in terms of the for-profit space is a business that has not only financial for-profit implications, but also betters society in some way, be it the environment, be it poverty alleviation, be it health. That's how I define it.
Thank you. And then Sayuri, what would you say?
So I think it's pretty similar to Harpreet's definition, but for me, a social enterprise, it has to be the core reason of starting that business has to have some element of social or environmental, addressing a need that is not being fulfilled. So it's important that the founding team wants to have this mission of having impact. And then in some way, the business aspect is very important because an enterprise that doesn't grow, by definition, fails and have no impact. So this is kind of a market-driven approach to get a financial return and using that to create more impact. So that's how I think about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sayuri. And then Vera, what would you say?
The way I define it for myself is similar to how Sayuri described the economic impact of social enterprises. So for me, a social impact venture is one where the solution, the product, whatever it is that they're building, deployment of that solution directly correlates with the impact of the venture. So these need to be connected for me. So let's say you're developing a product, you're putting it out in the world. You putting that product out in the world is the impact you're creating. So it's not a tacked on of, oh, we are building a certain app, but then we're also making donations, and that is very important to us, which I think that's still a lovely sentiment, but at its core for me, that is not a social impact venture. So this direct correlation of economic outcomes and impact is core when I look at these ventures.
So the direct correlation between impact and economic outcome. That definitely is one of the main issues that potentially people have. Potentially there's this myth that social impact ventures, they're all about doing good, but it might be questionable as to whether or not they can be economically sustainable. And so that brings us to the next question, which is how much focus would each of you recommend? How much focus should a founder place on generating revenue versus generating impact? And this one, Vera, could you please start us off?
Yeah, I would love to. So first, I think it is fair to say that if you're just looking at the financial outcome of the founder, you're probably better served starting typically a software venture and just optimizing for that. That being said, it does not mean that a social venture, a social impact venture, doesn't also generate returns either for the founders, the investors, all stakeholders. So in terms of how much focus should you put on generating revenue, I mean, exactly enough focus so that you can build and scale your venture the fastest, right? For me, if you want to impact the most amount of people, you need to grow your business. And if you need to generate a lot of revenue for that, and that's the only way to scale your business, then yeah, please do focus on that a lot, because you need to grow it, you need to scale it, or you're not getting it out to the people that really need it. So for me, it's tied in, the question of how much focus on your revenue, it's tied in with like, what is the fastest strategy to grow this?
Excellent point, thank you. So Yuri, what would you say about revenue, focusing on revenue versus focusing on impact?
So impact is pretty broad, covers pretty broad spectrum, right? So sometimes when we think of impact, we think of bottom of the pyramid, but that is not really the case. I mean, there needs to be a lot of economic development. For example, in Africa and Southeast Asia, we know that's where the population growth is going to happen. And really, if that segment of the world doesn't prosper, the whole world won't do well. And in the same way, in terms of environmental challenge, boy, I mean, if we can solve some of the fundamental issues related to that, that would make a huge difference. So depending on the area of impact you want to create, it might kind of dictate the total addressable market you're trying to operate in, or really the willingness to pay of the customers. In terms of bottom of the pyramid, I think it's hard to make it very profitable business. I think you can grow it to scale and kind of keep on going from that. But problem with that in, especially in Africa and these countries where the financial systems are not well developed, is there is no real exit. So how do investors get their money out? As we're developing more and more of those systems are taking place. But even in those countries, there's a play for middle class, lower middle class. And there's some spending money there. So bringing technology and serving people better in that country, and then utilizing native products to serve those people, that would be actually a really good business and financially very successful if you can deliver the right product. So again, I'll think about it from the perspective of what is the social entrepreneur trying to do, and then within building that, as Vera say, what is the right financial structure? It doesn't mean at all that if you're doing an impact business, you can have this vision of being a multi-billion-dollar company. I mean, there's potential there too, but again, it should be impact first. If you want to just make money, maybe there's easier way to do that than focusing only on impact.
Got it. Thank you, Sayuri. And then Harpreet, same question, which is how much focus would you recommend a founder place on generating revenue versus generating impact?
I think my answer is fairly similar to Vera and Sayuri, but similar to what Sayuri just said. Impact is what makes a social enterprise different. And I think what's fascinating right now is we're in a time of different economic models being tried out in for-profit businesses, be them impact or not. I think Gen Z is leading to a lot of really neat differences. And I'd actually like to answer this question by giving the example of my college roommate who has transformed Western North Carolina, our home state, and she's done this through a social enterprise. After graduating, she moved back to her hometown in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, which had been one of the centers of the textile industry throughout the 80s. And in the 90s, most of the textile industry left America and moved to Asia for lower production costs. So in North Carolina, we had many mills closed, many former garment workers unemployed. And so she started the first cooperative garment sewing company. It's called Opportunity Threads. Within 6 months, their books were fully booked for the first 6 months. They ended up having to expand their business. And what was fascinating about the way they did this, which is really a cooperative economic model offering livable wages to each of the members, it had many ripples over the last 10 years, ripples of impact that have regrown North Carolina's textile industry. There's now an overarching cooperative called the Industrial Commons that she founded, and an entire ecosystem of companies, small companies, medium-sized companies, brands, all working on revitalizing textiles, American textiles, domestic production. And it is quite fascinating to see the change in our economy in the state. Now, this started with focusing on on impact, and yet she did this in a for-profit model. And what's amazing to me is the amount of livable wages that have been cultivated through it.
So that was absolutely fascinating because we touched on a few different pieces. Number one is the concept, so the original concept of social impact investing, the impact being livable wages for the population. And then number two, you mentioned something very interesting, which is different economic models. So is there anything else you could say about, so you mentioned corporations. Are there other models that are popular that people might want to think about?
So,
yeah. Oh yeah, please say.
Sorry. So if you talk about structuring, there are some businesses, especially when it doesn't have a natural exit, it's still a corporation, but more and more people are starting to think about alternatives, and one of them is revenue share. And it's a scheme where investors get paid back over time based on a specific multiples of what the investment is. So it's patient initially because you don't have to pay back until you generate revenue, and then it's capped a certain amount, and then you basically pay back the investor, and then you keep the company. So something like a cooperative type structure, things that Harpreet were talking about, maybe those model will fit. And also, more and more nonprofits are switching their model to earn income, right? So rather than thinking that you have to raise every dollar that you spend, you can think of a way to have at least part of the services you offer to be for fee-based, and grow that in some ways. If you want to grow that business, thinking is also very much like a regular for-profit model. So that's kind of part of what social enterprise can encompass.
Thank you. Harpreet also jump right in. Vera as well.
Yeah, so to add on the social impact and go into kind of the clean tech space. So what we see a lot currently are companies that are making product that is clean, green, and can compete with existing product on price. So it's not more expensive, but you can still price it higher because people value the additional benefit. So I'll give an example. One of our portfolio companies, Radical Plastic, is making a completely biodegradable plastic that has all the same mechanical properties of traditional plastic. They're currently selling it into agriculture, replacing agricultural mulch films, which traditionally farmers have to roll out in the beginning of the growing season and then remove it and pay for recycling of that plastic film at the end of the growing season. So with the Radical Plastics film, you just have to roll it out. You can then till it into the ground. And for the farmers that are using that product, they're saving a lot of time. You don't have to pull it back out. You're saving a lot of money. You don't have to pay to get it recycled. So in that business model, the Radical Plastics business model, you can sell your product at a premium to the existing product, just like you would in a traditional like plastics compounder business, which is fantastic for the founders because you're creating value, your product has more value, and you're still
all the best, Gumby. I'll take
I lost my train of thought. Yeah, you're creating value. The product is fantastic, and you don't have to compete with people on price because people realize that I would pay more for this.
Those are all excellent examples. Thank you.
I think the one thing I would say in addition to what Sayuri and Vera have already said is I actually think that there's going to be a lot more innovation on business models in the future. There's a ton happening right now. It's an incredibly exciting time. When I was at Bridgespan, we worked only with nonprofits at that time, and that was the time, the 5 years where we saw a lot of not only foundations, but also enterprises pivot from nonprofit status to for-profit, and foundations began to also invest in LLCs. And I think there's going to be a lot of innovation happening. I'm excited for everything I'm seeing right now.
Very much so. Thank you. All right, last question before we open the floor up to audience questions. The last question is for the three of you. You've all had so much experience working with social enterprises, whether they, of all sizes in all locations. And I'm sure all of them come to you and say, we have like this grand vision is going to be so much impact and all of that, and it's going to be very, very hard to choose. And so then the question is, for each of you, what would convince you to work with a particular venture over another one? And so this one, Sayuri, could you please start us off?
Sure. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of different type of impact investing there are and what I do. And one of the investing I do is really out of my foundation. And my financial return goal is really to recycle so that I can keep on helping young social entrepreneurs start their business. So in that type of investment, I put a lot more focus on impact and impact more in the vulnerable population rather than serving people that is middle class or just more towards economic development. So that's one. And so as I talked about, the founding team has to be committed to their mission and then has to have a business model that will scale. And in terms of, who do I go for? This is, the same as any other business, because probably the most important thing is to have a founding team that has the tenacity. Without tenacity, you're going to fail because, there's no business that it starts out in a straight line and can succeed. And then in my more core portfolio, where I look for more market rate return or some kind of return, so because I need to live on that, then I probably would shift that impact focus to more products that's targeted at the growing middle class in those countries. So that promotes economic development, and the impact part is there, but not as directed at the bottom of the pyramid. And again, finding business is, the principle is the same.
Thank you, Sayuri. Harpreet, would you like to follow?
I think that team is really one of the most important things, as Sayuri mentioned. Impact is obviously key. Are you really going to better off the world or achieve the impact that you want? But when I see a founding team that's committed, dedicated, and also has the right skill sets, that's what tells me that this is going to stick and it's going to grow.
Thank you. And then Vera?
Yeah, actually, similar to Harpreet, I also would have said exactly that. The team is so core important to building a business, because typically these are things that don't exist and then you build them and they exist. That's a fascinating thing to do. And I like to define the core ability of really fantastic founders as their ability to get things done. So I have to tell myself this all the time. It is a different thing to be right from getting things done. Like, I feel like in my years of academic training, you're so focused on being right and getting correct answers and doing all of that. But it's a very different thing to get things done. So seeing that ability in a founder is so exciting. And to evaluate that in someone you don't know is quite difficult. So what I like doing is getting to know people over time. So meeting them now and then meeting them again in 3 months, a little later down the line, and see what are the steps you've managed to take, and yeah, getting things done as brief as that.
Wonderful, thank you. So some of the central themes, it seems, is that social entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship is still very, very much relevant, right? The social part has its place, but the entrepreneurship part also has its place. It's not just about social, because as one of you had said, if there's no revenue generating capability, then there is no impact. Like they come hand in hand. So wonderful, thank you. In the last 5 minutes, I'd like to open up the floor to audience questions. I do not currently see any questions in the chat, so we have 40 some participants with us live. If anyone has questions, please go ahead and jump right in.
Can ask me about anything.
Since nobody's asking us questions, maybe I'll ask, how many of the people that are attending is or wants to be a social entrepreneur? I don't know how, if you do, just put in chat.
I see
your
a
name.
hand raised.
Okay.
Leslie Field is raising their hand.
And how many of you wants to do impact investing? Oh, okay. Leslie, do you have a question for us?
Well, you know, I've got this interesting thing. I founded a nonprofit to work on restoring Arctic ice, and we haven't found a revenue model for that would ever allow us to have permitting and such. So I'm wondering if any of you, and Vera, I felt like, yes, I don't always get it right, but I do get things done. So I found that very encouraging.
I love it.
But what I was wondering is, do any of you ever help people in a situation like this find the revenue model, right? There are a lot of spin-off opportunities one could have, or try to finally convince the insurance industries it's in their best interest. You know, do you ever help entrepreneurs find that if they haven't been clever enough to figure it out themselves yet?
Yeah, so we do that a lot, or because of my background, I do that a lot with our materials companies, which have a fantastic material that could do anything, but where do you go first? Where is their willingness to pay? And I hope this process applies to you as well, but you're like, if this solution existed, who would benefit from it? And can we go to these people and see if there is a willingness to pay? So if you work backwards from your vision of success, seeing how did the world change, who did benefit, and then see if you can build a revenue model off of that.
And I just want to say that there are a lot of accelerators out there, and there are also ones that would take in folks that are not as advanced in their business development and thinking. And the program is exactly that, to kind of help you think through if you have an idea and if you want to make an impact, how do you structure a business model which will work? So I'll give a plug to GSBI Miller Center, because I am a mentor there, and there's a program there that you can apply for, and then they kind of go through the whole, business process, and they do take nonprofit who wants to have an earned income model that is market based.
And the one thing I'll say, Leslie, is the MIC community platform that we've set up in Mighty Networks is a place where we're trying to create a community to have, to create support for these types of questions that you have. The platform consists of entrepreneurs, investors, and philanthropists. And so please join and pose that question. And hopefully you'll be able to cultivate some relationships that'll help with that.
It looks like Mark has a question.
Thanks to all three of you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, just Steve Kirsch is an MIT alum, and he tried to fund some research to repurpose very low-cost drugs for COVID-19 treatment was very successful, finding a particular compound that looks very promising. And I just wonder, how can social entrepreneurs find a mechanism to take low-cost drugs that pharma has no interest in, and yet they're the best return on investment? NIH should be the one funding that, but they don't, because they seem to be very associated with pharma companies. How do we get more social entrepreneurs repurposing low-cost drugs to have a huge impact?
I'll take that question more from a technical perspective. So what you can do if you want to generate revenue with that strategy is you need a very talented patent lawyer and draft a patent of this new use of the existing drug. And then with that patent, you go to the company, the pharma company that holds the patent for the original drug, and you basically negotiate with them. It's like, hello, we found this new use of your drug. We can license this patent to you and we can do a revenue share. So that's the business model, and it requires very talented and ambitious patent drafting. So yeah, that will be one strategy. But I think Sayuri could maybe add to that as well with your background.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was a patent litigator for about a dozen years. But Mark, my answer to you is to do something like that needs someone that's passionate about that specific topic, right? Because you can't find a way to do something unless you really want to do it. I don't know that it's you, Mark, but I think everything starts with an entrepreneur who wants to make it happen. And if that person really wants to dig hard, they can do it. But we can't ask people to, because if they don't have a passion for the topic, then they're just not gonna have the tenacity and resilience to actually carry it out.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Pelon, Sayuri, Vera, and Harpreet for that wonderful panel discussion on social entrepreneurship. Pelon added some links in the chat and also on the slide to find out more information. So thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for
Thank you, Patricia.
letting
Thank
us
you.
talk to everybody. Bye.
Thank you.